Nope, there it goes.
All right, I think we're good to go. Sorry about that, guys.
All right. Um, okay, so I said before, my name's Brian Woodward. I work for ServerSide. I'm a co-founder and chief architect there, and we've done a lot of stuff with rendering templates on the server side for other engines like Handlebars and Lodash and things like that. And we've been recently getting into React, so I was finding a solution on how to render templates on the server side with React to show the data and then also get the live bindings and events on the client side. So just to start off, just going through the regular React tutorial, uh, like creating everything through through the way that they're suggesting, basically with the different components and the individual boxes. I mean, individual classes inside one file or in one element. I was able to make it easier to use that convention to render everything on the server side as one app and display it in HTML. Um, but the first thing that I want to show is first thing I want to show is just a simple client-only example of how React is normally rendered in the browser. So um, just a simple message that is going to be pulled from the state in a React element, and I'm using a timeout in my function to simulate getting something from a server that takes a long time, and just to show how this loads. Here we go. Okay, so this client, you'll see when it refreshes, initially loads a property that is set through this init get state. Sorry, I'm trying to get both these on here. So we see that the if the property is on here, it's going to set it, but if not, then it's going to just do hello client world, and that's what we see initially. All right, sorry, I refreshed the wrong browser. Okay. All right, so see hello client world, and then after a couple seconds, it's the remote one that gets returned, and that's how basic things work. But if we want to also show some initial data from the server side first, just to indicate that that like, or just to show some data before the whole thing loads, uh, I've got this other example here, which is so this is my same React component, which has uses the state for the message, but then also the key is having the props in the get initial state, um, or the hello client world. And what the difference is that we're going to have is I'm using a handlebars template here, just to inject the what we're going to render on the server side as the client, as the content here. And then I'm also injecting that JavaScript into the template, so we can use the same file, which is coming from here. And first, to get this running, some things that we need are in our build script. You would have to have React. Then there's also React tools. I've got So React, of course. Uh, React Tools is another NPM or another node module that's published from Facebook. It's under the same React GitHub, but the basic usage is for doing the transform. So we're going to turn the JSX files into regular JavaScript files using the transform string. So right here is where so I'm reading in the file my app.jsx and then using the transform to turn it into JavaScript. And then I'm wrapping this with additional script just to include the React and then the exports. And this allows me to eval that string, which usually isn't a good idea unless, of course, you're in control of your source. But this will, by doing the module exports, and I'm going to get my element back just like I would in regular JavaScript or in Node. And then using React create factory, I'm taking that element and generating the factory function that's going to be used to bind the properties to the element. And then right here is my message that's going to be put onto the props property in the React element, which would be used here. Now the key for server-side rendering is as simple as this: just render to static markup on the React object. So after you have your factory created and the app and it run through the function, you get another function that is your renderer, and the React render to static markup will then create plain HTML markup that is that's similar to that's just used in the HTML. So using that content, we're gonna render the handlebars template, passing the content as a property, and then the application JS I'm passing in for the other piece, and the script that's going to be used on the client. And that's just the plain file that was loaded. And then I just write this out to an index.html. And when it's built, you get your plain HTML with the string hello server world. And now, but you still have your application here set to load. And one thing that I changed here is I put a set timeout for a second just to show that to make the client wait before it starts to render the React, so we can see the one that's rendered from the server. You'll see first hello server world, then client, then remote. So first it'll load the plain HTML, and then if you have a lot of setup code for your client, then you can wait for that to load and then load any kind of client properties that you have, and then you can pull in any kind of remote data. I mean, that's the simplest use case of doing this. However, the setup, like having to try to do this build script, for simple files and things like that, is tedious. Here, let me just so one thing just to demonstrate is that render to static markup is one function you can use. You can also just use render to string. So render to string is going to add React ID data elements and the checksum to your HTML output, and this is useful for, I think it's just some of the binding that React does there. But when you look at the some of the output. I'm not really sure exactly the effect of this, but I do get this message here saying that it's trying to reuse markup that was rendered, and the checksum was different, even if it was, even if it's the same span that's being rendered. So uh, doing the render to static markup, you don't get that message, and I haven't figured out if there's any kind of performance benefits to that, or any other issue with that yet. Are there any questions about this?
Yeah, that's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty simple. Just managing your templates are the thing that I've had an issue with. So I mean, this is so as I said, we've done a lot of server-side rendering for other things, and we've built tools around that. And the one tool that we have is called Assemble, which it uses a technology or another tool, another library called Template underneath, and Template basically just allows you to it manages reading in various templates and um, and then lets you use different engines to render them based on, and you can add a lot of helpers and data files and things like that. So Assemble basically adds the like task part of it, like uh, to be able to. It's very similar to Gulp. So if you're familiar with Gulp, it uses a lot of the same API conventions, but it's just specifically for like static sites or doing a lot of more HTML rendering. But I've got a larger example here with um, with three different uh, React applications, I guess you can consider them. The simplest one would be just an authentication application that all it does is creates a form. Now, I realize a lot of this React client-side stuff probably isn't best practices because it's something that I'm still getting used to and new at. But so if you see anything that stands out, uh, I'd like to hear if there's a better way to handle this. But but the basis of this authentication module is just to show a form when you're logged in that just lets you log out, and then a form to log in when you're logged out, and that's pretty much it. The sign on and sign out methods are supplied by the an overall application controller. We can see that in this main application. So this is the client side application that's going to be used. It'll use the authentication, user list, and chat module. Signing on just sets a global data property to simplify it, and then tells the server that that user is signed on. Signing out tells the server that the user signed out, and then I've got small sub functions just to render each of my applications into another ID here: user list, navbar, chat. So so this all works as like a client-side app, like you'd normally expect. Um, if you're going to be separating them all like that, but to get these using this the common JS method, I know you've talked about Webpack before, and I'm using Browserify. So when we look, basically ignoring everything else, this Browserify method right here is what I need to just compile my, starting at my main JS entry point. Um, it pulls in all the files, and I use Reactify, and that transforms them just like the React tools.transform, which is very similar. And then I write out to a file in my site for my assets here. So this is my app browserfied, and it's going to look very similar to that main app, and then just with all the other libraries include, or all the other files included. Um, for the other thing that for our server-side rendering, though, this is mainly for development purposes. We have templates and handlebars, which a basic layout for our handlebars layout doesn't. I'm using some Bootstrap for styling because that's another thing I'm poor at. But here I've got a helper that's called app, and it takes in authentication, and this is my React component basically. It's all that it is, and it's going to drop that React component in there and render it on the server side. And I've got my React included here, and the app that's generated by Browserify included at the bottom. I'm going to have an index page that has the user list app and the chat app. To get this working with Assemble, basically I've got an engine here that's called it's an engine React, and this is doing a lot of that grunt work that was shown in that build.js script, where it takes that everything and does the transforms and wraps it in the correct correct code that's needed to be able to render it. And then I register it as for the extension.jsx. So any templates that have JSX are going to be rendered with that engine. And then and I'm creating a new type. This is something specific to template, just called app, and that gives me that that handlebars helper that allows me to pull in those templates and render them out on the server. So
how have you handled? Sorry, I hit the wrong button. How are you handling the service request on the server side? I saw you were using, was that jQuery for
yeah,
the
just
client?
just jQuery, because so the app, so this chat app follows um, that tutorial for React based on their comments, and it's similar to that. It's just posting. It's pretty much doing the comments things, and so they've got the handle comment, excuse me, and I'm just posting to an API endpoint, which so my server here is just a few endpoints. I've got can get comments, create new comments, get users, create a user, and delete a user. That's basically for sign and stuff, and all that is doing is middleware for Connect on Node to, and I'm just using it here as my API endpoint and creating the server. So what happens in the whole process is I load all the apps from my uh, React folder, from my apps folder here, all the React components, and then I load in the handlebars pages that I want to render and write them out to the site folder and set up reload. And this is all the steps that are needed for basically doing that build, but it could handle multiple applications and multiple pages compared to that build.js script. So those few lines there, and then all the other stuff is just doing the workflow around live reload and handling styles and all the other things in an application. But if I come back and just run, I've got assemble dev, creates this. So this is my simplified chat application, and then with 3 different React applications that are communicating through the main controller. So when I sign in, it posts to the server the user signed in, and then shows the user list here. I can say hi, and then I can also so this is, I mean, it's pretty simplified, just using jQuery to pull every few seconds to be able to update the list and then the comments. But you can see doing other stuff like having a better controller to be able to do like socket IO, things like that. And but the main part was like a lot of the stuff was, all these elements were rendered on the server side before actually um, creating the app on the client side. Uh, it's sometimes hard to come up with a good example that's a bigger example to show, with latency and everything. But that's why I attempted to do in the simple example to show how, like, set timeout, you could show the server side stuff, then the client rendering, and then any kind of data that's pulled. Um, but I've got. That's not it. So I've got the project up on GitHub. If anyone wants to take a look at it closer to see exactly, how those demos were set up. I mean,
Yeah, and we can link to that after this call. I'll get you that. I'll get that link and we'll post it to the group.
okay. Uh, the specifics for the server-side part in this React engine is very similar to what was done in that build script, where it's doing the transforming the string that comes in after adding some additional code to make it work on the server, and then um, basically returning a function to use for rendering, and that can take a context in. So yeah, I mean, if there's any questions to clear things up, I know it's just a lot of code. So
So, what was the reason you decided to do server-side rendering? I know some people want to do it for SEO reasons, but what was the draw for you?
yeah, well, the main thing that I wanted to accomplish was, in our application, we like a lot of static pages, but we want to make sure to still have some of that dynamic elements on there, and for like performance reasons, like if there's things that we can load on the server and render faster than we can uh, do after presenting the application to the user in the browser, then we'd rather do it as soon as possible there. Uh, and it's mainly to be able to load faster.
To clarify a thing or two, the handlebars templating that you're doing is not directly tied to the need to do the server side rendering. That's just, you just prefer that syntax, the handlebars.
Yeah, yeah. So you can basically, just take this and you write this out. I mean, this is what's rendered, that content there. Uh, so and that's the only part of my React application. You can build an entire app, an entire page with React syntax and and or the JSX and render it out into your HTML, and maybe only just do string concatenation or something, or use any other template that you want on the server side. So you could potentially build a service that you send a request to for your page, and it builds the React piece of your HTML, and just returns that, and then you could use it in other things. So if you're doing Ruby or
Sure.
or something like that, then you can inject it that way too.
The crux of the question was sort of because one of my principal reasons for moving to React on my current project is so that I could explicitly deprecate handlebars. I had it in with spine controllers and sort of an arbitrary model. We're using Couch for some other things as well. But one of the things that attracted me so much to React in the last few weeks, last month or so, was the notion that I could go conceivably to a single file that represents the entire component and make all the appropriate adjustments. It makes for some nice compartmentalization. I just finished watching Christopher Chadeau's talk from last week. I muddled through his French accent, but he's almost got me this close to deprecating 90+% of all my CSS files as well. So I'm headed like the other direction when it comes to total number of files involved. But the server-side rendering component here is really interesting to me, especially they have two different methods, you say, that are for rendering. There's render to string and render to static markup, and the render to static markup strips out all their React IDs and stuff.
Yes. So that and I was curious to see how that worked when I first started using it, because I thought you needed the IDs to make the client side work properly, but it just worked fine. So they still do their DOM like differencing or whatever to be able to compare properly, I guess, without the IDs, or they just overwrite the entire component with your new data.
My assumption is that the IDs are there to aid in the speed at which the diffing can happen, but that's just a speculation. I don't really understand it yet.
Yeah. Yeah, so the main point of our handlebars is to only render the pieces on the server with handlebars and not use handlebars in the browser. So that's why we'd prefer to use some other things that are separate. But
Gotcha.
Yeah, and for for different sites where you don't have to have any dynamic content, pre-building static pages can speed up your what you serve to your users a lot more. So, and that was the one part that just with the whole build system, because our main goal is getting designers to be able to work with developers better too. That's like internally, and I came from a .NET world where it was always pretty hard to get designers to try to use Visual Studio and all those things. But so that's why we built Assemble. But like by doing this, you're still decoupling that design part, because your designer can still make changes to some of the layouts. Like this, assign it. Like they can still go into your into things like your app here, like authentication, and they might not care anything about this part, which I need to learn a little bit more about mix-ins and see how those work with React, because I think a lot of this can be separated out too, and but then they can just work with this piece of the JSX, which looks like kind of looks like HTML to them, by using the CSS and all that, and change something like login here, and it just with live reload and all the building, kind of get your whole kind of closed loop workflow there. Um,
And BJ, you talked about writing your CSS and actually writing it in JavaScript, kind of like um, that talk you referenced, how he was talking about. You should check out Radium.
Yeah, I'm auditioning it now. I don't want to
Yeah.
hijack the Hangout, but that's an excellent little sidebar.
yes.
I'm yeah, Radium is really it's interesting.
Yeah, so contact me if you like it, and let me know if you want to talk about it at one of our meetups. So.
All right, we'll do.
Yeah, that'd be interesting because I saw this link too here.
Yeah.
Yes. The first thing every developer does when he discovers a new way to do something with CSS is something obnoxious.
Yep. So, I mean, I don't have anything else. If unless someone has more questions, and we can try to talk through stuff. But
I'm set. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, yeah, and feel free to give me some feedback if you like these style of meetups rather than an in-person, because we could do these and maybe do an in-person once a quarter or something like that. But feel free to give me some feedback. Besides for the big snafu of creating the wrong type of hangout, what we could do to make this better.
okay,
Awesome. Hey, thanks, Brian. For that was awesome, and it was surprisingly
simple.
to actually get that React out. I was surprised how easy that was. That was cool.
Yeah, it's a lot easier than I thought it would be. But I think it's just playing nicely with other components is the hardest part. So, but great. Thanks for letting me do this.
Yeah, thanks. Awesome talk. All right, guys. Take care. See ya.
Thanks.